What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to White Sox Daily once again. I'm Aaron Feely. The Chicago White Sox continuing to push through this offseason, continue to insert their names into some big-time discussions, big-time competitions for some of these free agents and potential trade opportunities. A couple of familiar storylines having some new twists coming up, and a couple of new stories out there here, starting right off the bat with one of the big ones. We obviously have already discussed Tatsuya Imai previously, especially after the Murakami signing, especially after the Chicago White Sox have hired a head of Japanese scouting this particular offseason, which has led to a number of reports of the White Sox being in on several of these key Japanese free agents that posted this offseason. And one of the big ones now is that we officially have massive odds shifts for the Chicago White Sox on starting pitcher Tatsuya Imai, as Chicago suddenly has jolted up in that particular sweepstakes right now, and that is huge news for the Chicago White Sox, who obviously are in desperate need of starting pitching. And to bring in yet another key free agent from a foreign market here could really be turning the tides for Chicago. There was also reports coming in today from Yahoo Japan stating that the Chicago White Sox are now actually seen as a big destination, a attractive destination to Japanese superstars making the climb over, with the only holdup at the moment being the delayed ownership transfer from Jerry Reinsdorf to Ishba, as Reinsdorf still seen overseas. I believe the quote was actually based on Reinsdorf that he does not embody the competitive spirit that these Japanese superstars and Japan kind of as a baseball culture looks to embody, and that Reinsdorf's presence within the Chicago White Sox has been one of the key holdups as far as getting more free agents here to Chicago, but that as it stands right now, the White Sox franchise and the White Sox as a future destination looking more and more attractive in that particular market at this time, which is huge news for Chicago. It looks like kind of making the transition from what was previously a big Cuban pipeline for the White Sox, slowly making its shift to a Japanese pipeline to try to get those superstars over here stateside to come to the south side of Chicago. I think that's a big upgrade as well for the Chicago White Sox. Jose Abreu and Luis Robert were massive gets for the White Sox, but other than that, it wasn't really doing that much magic for the White Sox to continue to feed themselves through that Cuban pipeline. The Cuban Missile Crisis, fun nickname back in 2020, didn't really result in much, and hoping to potentially make a much bigger splash going the eastern route here as opposed to continuing down that path. Speaking of Luis Robert, though, a guy whose name has been out there every single week, every single month, every single day, basically, when it comes to Chicago White Sox news, and one of the teams that we had heard had been really interested in him, apart from, the New York Mets and San Diego Padres, who were both involved in potential trades for Luis Robert. We had heard there were discussions between the White Sox and all three of these teams. One of those teams now officially out. The Cincinnati Reds pulling back, dropping out of this one. The Reds have made a number of outfield moves and are no longer in conversation with the Chicago White Sox in regards to Luis Robert. That's obviously massive for White Sox believers like myself who want Luis Robert here in Chicago, not just this coming year, but then potentially for many years left to come, probably for at least 4 to 5 more years. I'd like to see Luis Robert continue here in Chicago. Let us know what you guys think about it down in the comments section below. But this is a massive blow to those that want to trade Luis Robert before the season even begins, but a massive, massive sign that he is going to be right here in Chicago come opening day, and presumably for a decent chunk of the 2026 season, if not the entire season. With the Cincinnati Reds no longer interested, that was one of the big names attached to a potential Luis Robert trade, and now totally out of this one. And yeah, I think that puts a real potential damper on any potential trade coming for Luis Robert. The Cincinnati Reds were thought to be one of the big-time front runners for his services, and with them out, I think it definitely just skyrockets the odds for Luis being in center field, especially with Chicago still being so unknown as to what we're doing out in the outfield. I think, I mean, at this point, if you still trade him, you're selling low just to sell. I mean, you're really just trading him just to trade at this point. And you're not going to get his real value back in return based on the fact that there's just not enough suitors out there. He's a guy that you know for a fact has massive upside. He was a true superstar just a couple of years ago before two straight kind of down seasons, mostly based on injury, have dampened his appeal to some other teams quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, you might as well just see if you can get him to bounce back other than trade him for scraps. So I think that this is big for people like myself that wanted to see him back. I think Luis Robert will be back, and I think with Cincinnati pulling out, you will see Luis Robert hopefully bouncing back to form in a Chicago White Sox uniform in 2026. And that'll lead us right into our third topic here today, and that is projecting what the lineup is going to look like come opening day. Obviously, now a lot of the attention in free agency has started to turn towards starting pitching and what we can do to add in that spot. So I think for the most part, you're looking at a potentially set group of actual hitters lined up here for the Chicago White Sox. So now the question becomes, what do we suppose opening day is going to look like? We'll try to take a little preview here as to where we think everyone's going to fit, where everyone's going to be in the order, etc., etc. And I think right off the bat, Chase Mydroth looks to potentially pick up right where he left off at the end of last season, kind of in that top of the order role that he was fairly decent in last year. Chase Mydroth, a guy that was making good contact, getting on base, setting the table nicely. I think he looks to be the front runner right now to be out there at second base and being at the top of the card there at number one. I think probably hitting at number two. There's a number of options you could go with here. Potentially you go the DH spot. Potentially a number of different paths to go. I think they probably squeeze in a guy who was really hot in the second half of last year, Miguel Vargas from third base. I also was tempted to put Luis Robert back into that second spot, but I think he is starting to really fill in better back at that four spot, which is where I've got him right now, and playing center field. And right between the two of them, I think Colson Montgomery. No need to tinker with that in the slightest. He has been spectacular. Leave him there at the 3-hole. Let him continue to do good work there, and likely, obviously, filling in at shortstop. Then at 5, at opening day, I think Murakami could be a guy that maybe rises up as the season goes on, could be hitting in that 4 or that 3-hole if he continues to really impress, and then you're able to move Montgomery up a spot or two. Maybe Luis Robert does move back to the 2, but I believe right off the bat they're going to try to protect Munetaka Murakami a little bit here as he hits back at the 5, continues to bring some of that power as he then tries to work his way back up the lineup. But he'll start off in the heart of the lineup hitting at 5, and then right behind him they'll stick Andrew Benintendi in left field. He'll hit 6, the guy who showcased a little bit more power than he had been showing for Chicago in previous seasons last year. We hope to keep that running into 2026. And then at 7, I've got Kyle Teal, who was also hitting extremely well toward the end of last season. Hope to keep that rolling. He and Edgar Quero look to kind of platoon there at catcher. I think whoever's catching likely going to be hitting 7 or 8, and whoever is not likely to be the DH in certain games, hitting back at 8, and obviously whatever you're doing in right field likely to be the 9 hitter no matter what, whether it's Brooks Baldwin, whether it ends up being Pereira, sorry. But that kind of leads us to our fourth topic here, and that is who will be the primary DH. I went back and forth on this one because Lenyn Sosa led the team in home runs last year. He's also a candidate to potentially platoon in there at second base. I think Sosa is a guy that you're going to want hitting as many times as possible this upcoming season, but there is a lot of momentum here that it's going to be Edgar Quero. Whichever catcher isn't playing is DHing, and that's kind of what the White Sox want to do to open up next season. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Obviously, I love both the catchers and what they bring to the table, but Lenyn Sosa was just so dynamic last year at the plate, a guy that brought tremendous power and was really starting to pick it up with his contact game. But you guys let us know your feelings about it in the comment section below. Who would you rather see DHing? Whoever's not catching, or Lenyn Sosa for the majority of the games in 2026? We'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below, and we'll see you guys next time here on White Sox Daily.